we're going to be learning mostly Gemara today. A fascinating, I don't even know if we're going to get it all done in one day. It's going to be Masechet Sanhedrin, Tractate Sanhedrin, Daf Kuf Zayin, Amud Aleph, and Amud Bet, Folio 107, Folio A, and Folio B. And it's a really, really interesting Gemara. It's Agadita. It's where the Gemara doesn't so much teach laws. Some sections of the Talmud are hilchasa. We're learning laws, halacha, and some are agadita. Agadita is legends and stories, midrash, and we are going to be studying the agadita related to the matter of David and Bathsheba, and what happened up on that rooftop, and how it was that she could be seen, and so on and so forth and so forth and so on. And it's going to go in all kinds of interesting directions. And I want to add this to the intro for what we're doing now. We have now learned chapter 11 completely, and we are ready to go to chapter 12, the aftermath of the sin of David and Bathsheba. Really, David's sin more than Bathsheba's. And we're going to have the prophet Nathan. He comes and he tells David, and I gave you a brief glimpse of that last class, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, has gone to Nathan, told him to go to David and tell him, other people may not know what just happened, but I know what just happened. Other people may be completely in the dark, not even know anything happened at all. I know what happened on both levels. I know that technically, legally, everything you did was legal. And I know that what you did was outside the pale of acceptability. So that was Natan. And the question has arisen a few times in our class, how was it that she was in a mikveh, understandably on a rooftop mikveh? We've talked about why she had a rooftop mikveh in past classes, but how is it that she was in a mikveh in such a way, if mikveh is for modesty purposes, and even the modern day synagogues that have mikvahs go to great efforts to make sure that, let's say, the husband drops off his wife and then gets away from there, doesn't linger in the parking lot at the mikvah. The husband's supposed to go a block or two away and not see who's coming and going to the mikvah, even though he's got no negative thoughts. So the mikvah is supposed to be a source of great modesty, and she's going in a pool, naked, capable of being seen across the way in the horizon by someone a block or two away. What's that all about? And that's the question that arose. And I've been telling you, the Gemara talks about it, and she had not intended her mikveh was private. It was not available to be seen by others. And something happened, and I kept saying, I'll bring you I'll bring you the Gemara. We're gonna learn it. So we're gonna learn that. We're gonna learn more in that Gemara. Just one more thing on this. I've told you this in the past, but our Tuesday night class has not been a Gemara class, although we use a lot of Gemaras. A lot of times we bring in the Talmud, but we haven't. It's not a fundamentally Talmud class. It's fundamentally a Navi Prophet's Bible class with commentators. But a Gemara class, when you learn Gemara week after week after week, months, years, you get used to the pace, the tempo, and the style of Gemara, of the Talmud. And it is very, very common that we run into segues. The Gemara should be imagined or understood as a bunch of rabbis sitting in a study hall talking, discussing points of law or of history, logic, events, Bible, and they talk about it, and each offers his opinion, and then sometimes they get off topic. As happens, I got off topic, I started talking about getting a haircut, and they get off topic, and eventually they get back to the topic, but the discussion goes in all different directions. So this will be not only for us a deeper immersion into chapter 11, but also a really good opportunity to get a taste and feel of how the Talmud is, what goes on. So we're actually, I guess, join with me as we tiptoe into this rabbinical academy of 2,000 years ago, and as we listen in to the people in the other room as they're talking about the story of David and Bathsheba. If you're seeing us on YouTube, I'm Rabbi Rav Fischer of Young Israel of Orange County. We hope that you'll give this a like if you find it worthwhile. It matters if we get likes, and it helps us and builds up our subscriber base. And we hope you'll subscribe. Does not cost you anything. And we hope you'll even send a link to people that you know. And here we go. Sanhedrin 107a. Sanhedrin is the name of the tractate. It actually deals with the laws of courts and judges. And it's already going into a segue before we arrive. And they're now talking about the story of David and Bathsheba. Omar Rav Yehuda Omar Rav. A rabbi named Yehuda said, I heard the following from a greater rabbi, or a great rabbi named Rav. This rabbi was so great, he was simply known as Rav, the rabbi. He was the chief rabbi of the Jews of Sura in Babylonia. Liolam al yavi adam atzmo lidei nisayon. And this is a lesson for you and me also. A person should never go out of his way to tempt fate or to tempt God or to bring himself in a situation where he's defying trouble. I don't want to take your time and start lecturing, and everyone's got a different opinion about, let's say, doing daredevil things and getting involved in action adventures, things like rappelling or jumping from airplanes, parachuting. Each person knows what they do for sports and how they enjoy themselves in life. But there is something where people sometimes like to push their limits just for the fun of feeling near death. And there actually are people like that who enjoy going near death, feeling that they've got it figured out. They're not going to die, but it's going to be really exciting. I'm going to do this thing, but I've taken some basic precautions. And what we're learning here is we should not tempt God. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't do whatever you enjoy doing, but as a general overriding principle, and I think it comes up most frequently with those Darwin Award things you read in the media about these social media idiots who decide that in order to get a great picture doing something incredibly deadly so that they could get more followers, they end up killing themselves. They decide to hang from a cliff by one hand, and then they slip and they're dead. And then they do all things to get the perfect shot, the perfect photo of an iconic building. They stand on a cliff, like half their feet are on the cliff, half their feet are off the cliff, and there's a strong wind or whatever, or they cough, and next thing you know, they're gone, and they get a Darwin Award. We should not do that. We should thank God Almighty for our safety and our health, and we should always be mindful of God. Everything we do, even bad things that happen, we should be mindful of God, and we should always think about how He's doing everything for our good and for our best, and we shouldn't take advantage of it. I had an experience yesterday. I'm going to be very brief on this one. I was parked, I had to go to a doctor's office, and they have a big 5-story or 4-story parking lot. And again, without my going into the story, I had one of those things like that Seinfeld episode where I didn't know where my car was. And I just couldn't figure it out. And I ended up having to, I thought maybe it's on the second floor or third floor. I knew where it is on the floor. I just didn't remember which floor. And so from the ground floor, I thought it was the second or third floor. Of course, it turned out to be on like the fifth floor, the highest floor of the thing. I ended up walking like 45 minutes up ramps, up ramps, up ramps. And part of me was quite upset, really upset. But I think at age 71, I finally have begun to internalize what I teach. And I stopped and I thought, is God, maybe there's something good in this? And I started to thank God. I can do this walk. I don't think I could have done that walk 6 months ago because of the lung transplant. And I had internalized, there's a blessing in this. And somewhere from the third floor to the fifth floor, I was first to third floor, I was really angry. Third floor to fifth floor, I started thanking God. Thank you, God. I want to see, can I make it up to the fifth floor? I haven't tested myself in this kind of upward kind of, that's how we should be. And we should not test God. We should not say, well, now that I see I can do this, let me see whether I can do something utterly irresponsible that could even be endangering. And so Rav brings this out, but it's also spiritually so. We should not put ourselves in spiritual areas of peril to show how holy I am. Shouldn't walk down it's kind of related to this, that's why I'm coming up with it. Shouldn't walk down like a sidewalk that's lined with prostitutes. I saw there was a video on YouTube in Ocasio-Cortez's district. She's got blocks and blocks of people standing there, like 12, 20 different prostitutes, just stopping every guy walking down the block. Let's say someone would say to himself, I am so religious, I'm going to test myself. I'm going to walk down a block in Ocasio's district where there's prostitutes all over the place to show that I'm bigger than that. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to put yourself in a position where one woman after another is going to grab at you or whatever they do and invite you. You stay away from that. You don't put yourself in temptation. It's a very important concept. So let's see how it plays out in the Gemara. So Rav Yehuda says, I heard from Rav, Al yavi adam atzmo lidei nisayon. A person should not bring himself to test God. Shaharei David melech Yisrael, because David, the king of Israel, hevi atzmo lidei nisayon v'nechshal. He just got a thought one day, ready to test himself, to show God how righteous he has become. And he invited God to test him. And he failed. And you know what the test and failure was. Omar lefanav, Ribono shel olam. David said to God Almighty, Master of the universe, Ribono shel olam, Mipnei ma omrim Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. Why is it that in the Jewish main prayer, the Amidah, the Shmona Esrei, people begin by thanking God, praising the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoteinu. The Amidah begins, blessed are you, Lord our God and God of our fathers. Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Hakel HaGadol HaGibor v'Norah. You are the God of Abraham, the God of our fathers, of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob. David said, at a moment of mischievous thinking, let's say, why is it that Omrim Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, why is it that Jews, when they pray, always invoke those three? Ve'ein Omrim Elohei David. And they don't also say, and the God of David. I mean, after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he doesn't seem to include Moshe and Aaron. He says, like, by your grace, I'm the progenitor of the Messiah. And why don't they, when they invoke your mercies and say, you please, in the merit of of my ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, why don't they also say David? Omar, now there are many reasons. The most obvious reason is that the first three were the patriarchs of the Jewish people. And we all are the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Anyone who's not of the line of the tribe of Judah, Yehuda, is not a descendant of David. And even within the tribe of Judah, not everyone came only from that branch of the tribe. There are other reasons as well, but God said, why? Amar inhu minsuli, va'adlo minasetli. With them, I put them through a nisayon, a test. They've all been tested. Abraham was brought to Mount Moriah to sacrifice a son. Yitzchak was brought to Mount Moriah by his father to be sacrificed in the name of God and did not buckle. Yaakov was tested by the angel who wrestled with him, and the 20 years with Lavan, and so much else. Having his son Yosef kidnapped and no contact for 22 years. Va'at lo minasidli. You, David, have never been tested. Amar lefanav ribono shel olam bechaneni. David said, Master of Universe, go ahead and put me to the test. V'naseni, go ahead, try me. Shneimar, as it says, David wrote most of the Psalms, not all 150, but a great many of them. So in one of his Psalms, he says, Bechaneni Hashem v'niseni gomer, etc. Let's see what he says. Psalm 26, a Psalm of David, LaDavid. Shafteni Hashem, ki ani betumi halachti. God, judge me. Go ahead, judge me. Because I walk in simple honesty. Uvashem batachti lo emad. I have complete faith in God. I'm always there. I'm good. Test me. Probe me, O Lord. Bechaneni Hashem v'naseni. Probe me and try me. Test my heart and mind. For my eyes are on your steadfast love. I've set my course by it. I do not consort with scoundrels or mix with hypocrites. I detest the company of evil men. Do not consort with the wicked. I wash my hands in innocence. I walk around your altar. So go ahead, David. David basically, in a kind of nice way, if you really see that's why I read a few more Pesukim verses. He's not just being like brash, like someone in a wrestling ring, putting on a show like some Hulk Hogan or something like that, saying, come on, try it, take me on, let's see. Or I hate to say it, but like some of the politicians out there on both sides of the aisle, who get very arrogant about, go ahead, take me on, I can handle. David was saying it, oh God, I'm honest, I trust in you, I'm righteous. I'm not bragging to the public that I'm righteous. I'm just saying between us, in private, I'm whispering, I'm righteous, I do what I'm supposed to, and if you don't mind, I'd like to confirm that I'm at the top of my game. So I'm asking you to test me. And that's the way, it's sort of like, again, not in pure arrogance. It's almost as if to say, how can I confirm that I'm truly pure in my obedience and in my righteousness? I guess I have to be tested, and we'll confirm I passed the test. I can do it. All right. So he said that. God said, Amar, mina sena lach va'avidna milsa. So, milta, I will test you. Gesundheit hate. I will test you, and I will set up a scenario, bahadach, that's going to confront you, and let's see how you do with the test you want so much. Diladidhu lo hodatinu. Ve'ilu ana komodan lach. You see, with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, by the way, I never informed them in advance I'm testing them. The tests came their way. At a certain point, I commanded Abraham to go to Mount Moriah with his son. And Yitzchak even less. knew even less about what was going on the way up to the mountain. And Yaakov had no idea what was going on where Yosef was, or whether he was dead, or what was in store for him in Lavan's house for 22 years. I didn't warn them, but I'm giving it a little bit of an advantage. Like the way the Israeli army, the Israeli Air Force, they send out the leaflets and the notices and the phone calls to tell the Arabs in Gaza that we're bombing this building in another 5 minutes to get out. There's a big difference when you get advance notice. So you're a little bit better. You're having there's a difference in school between when the teacher throws a surprise quiz at you, or tells you next Tuesday we're having a surprise quiz. So I'm telling you in advance, the menaseh lach b'dvar erva. I'm going to test you in a matter concerning immorality with a woman. See how you do. Vayhil eit erev miyad. Right away after the warning, not that God did not even leave time for David to forget that he had been warned previously that one of these days it's coming, but miyad, immediately, vayhil eit erev vayakam David me'al mishkavo. So it was evening time. David got out of his bed and he looked across the way, and the test began. Omar Rav Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda continues, well, we'll skip number 4, keep going. Vayetalech al gag beit hamelech, and David went from his bedroom onto the roof of his palace. We've learned this. Vayar isha rochetzet me'al hagag, he saw a woman immersing herself in a pool of water, washing herself. We've learned about it having been a mikveh. V'ha'isha tovat mareh ma'od, and the text itself says that the woman was extraordinarily beautiful. But Sheva Hava, Kachaifa Resha, and she was Bathsheba, and at the time she was shampooing her hair. She was washing her hair with like a shampoo, tute chalta, and as that was going on, she was doing it behind a concealment. She had a large, they say, the Gemara says, that she had structured the mikveh behind a large beehive. Yeah, Beehive, a really, really big one that was big enough to cover the area where she would stand up. Now keep in mind, we're not talking about, if your mind would ask yourself, come on, can a beehive cover? Well, it's not a swimming pool. We're not talking about a swimming pool that has many yards. We're talking about, I've shown you pictures on a previous class of like a square body of water, a square kind of pool, not suitable for swimming, but suitable for dunking oneself, going into the square of water and bending over at the waist so that the upper half of the body can immerse also, that the head with the hair goes in, and not a long amount. And the beehive was a major size beehive that was adequate to cover that. And, if you don't disturb the bees, that thing can stay there quite a long time. So she was relying on that beehive and never had a problem. And nobody ever saw anything past it because there was this distance, and it was in such a way that it didn't even cover necessarily the lower half of the mikveh pool. Think of like a stand-in jacuzzi. I think that's an example. A little square jacuzzi without the electric bubble stuff. And so it just covered what had to be covered. And so she was washing her hair, and she was safely covered by that. Atas Satan, God sent Satan. Now, Satan is an interesting discussion for another class, even a course. Satan, which is the Hebrew word from which the English Satan term comes from. Satan here is like God's angel messenger. We've been learning about in different times, in different ways, that God sends angels. Not frequently, but every so often. When Abraham got circumcised and he was recovering, 3 men were walking by, and he got up and he called them in to provide them with hospitality, and they turned out to be angels. One was sent to heal Abraham, one was sent to bring the news that Sarah would be giving birth in a year, and one was actually sent to go forth beyond there, proceed to Sodom and Amorah, and to tell Lot he had come to destroy the city and get him out. We've seen other angels just this past week. An angel of God was sent, some say it was an angel sent by Esav, many say it was by God, to wrestle all night with Yaakov. There are angels from time to time. It's not a common imagery and an occurrence in the Tanakh, in the Bible, but it happens. And here, and God has angels like Michael, Michael, Gabriel, Uriel. They all end with the letters El for those that don't know Hebrew so well. The El is for the Hebrew word El, God. Uriel, God is my light. Gabriel, God is my strength, from Gibor. Michael, and so on and so forth. These are all named that way because of God. And he's got Satan. Satan is his bad guy angel, the angel that he sends to do evil things. And so he sent Satan to do this test. He himself would not do the test of David. David wants a test. He told David the test will be over morality. Now the test comes. He sends Satan. What does he do? Idmile kitsiparta. Tzipor is a bird. Satan changed the shape, took on the shape of a bird. Pitak be gira. And what he did was he started fluttering around in front of David. And David was not thinking about looking at some woman. He's probably been on that balcony 100 times. He's never noticed anything. But there's something about that bird. He grabs an arrow and he decides to shoot it. And he shoots the arrow at the bird. Patke lechalta. And he missed. And instead of hitting the bird, he hit the chalta, the beehive. Igale v'chazye. And the beehive just like burst open. A high-powered, fast-flying arrow smashed into the beehive, crashed open the beehive. The bees went wherever they went, and there was nothing blocking the lady who was standing on the other side at that moment. Here's his test. Miyad, vayishlach David vayidrol isha. Immediately when David saw what he saw, he sent out messengers to ask about that woman. Vayomer halosot bet Bathsheba bat Eliam. They came back and said, well, this is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, Eshet Uriah, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Vayishlach David malachim vayikacheha. David then sent messengers to bring her to the palace. Vatavo elav vayishkavima. She came into the palace. He slept with her. Vihimet kadeshet mitumata. And she had been in a state of ritual purity, having just been in a mikveh. Vatashav al beitah. And she left the palace when it was done, and she was given leave to leave. She left. She didn't stay around for pillow talk. And we've talked about this was not something she was looking to get in. She wasn't looking for this. She wasn't asking for this. She was brought there sort of, if not against her will, without her knowing what the reason that she's being brought to the palace. It happened. And she went home, and possibly, I'm just making this up, I don't know, but possibly she was shaken up. Even if it wasn't rape, she might very well have been shaken up. What just happened? Trying to make heads and tails of this. We've all heard tragic testimonies of people who have been raped, and we hear the very similar reports all the time about, like, sometimes, why didn't you report it right away to the police? And they were just in a state of shock for a while. And then maybe they told a neighbor or a friend, and maybe not, and maybe they called the police or whatever. So we don't know the exact detail of whether it was forcefully a rape, whether it was sort of like quasi-consensual, where I'm the king, you've been to the mikveh, you're not currently married, I'm telling you this is okay. I don't know what's going on there with her. There's nothing in the text or in the commentaries that really go and clarify that aspect of it. But we know she goes back to her house. And we've learned this several weeks now, so we don't have to go back to those texts. And so let's take a look at the text we're quoting here. It's from 17:3. Let's find it prepared. Obviously, I prepared a great deal, but I didn't prepare that one. Okay. And so he says to God, he's saying to God, I passed the test. That was the test, right? I passed it. Ba'achanta libi, you tested my heart. Plakadat halayla, and I did well. I did not go after a woman who was not from a mikveh. She was ritually clean. I did not go after a married woman. She was divorced. I passed the test, right? Sraftani bal timtza zamoti bal ya'avor pi. So I came out okay, right? And then David says, I guess maybe not. Amar eko zamama nifal bafume demandasani lay. Maybe I would have been better if a muzzle had covered my mouth. V'lo amar ki hamilta, and I hadn't gotten myself into this. So he's beginning to realize that it might have been legally okay, but it was not okay. And it's not just that it was not okay, it was mega not okay. And by the way, the worst hasn't happened yet. You and I have learned together the worst that ultimately unfolds. She ends up pregnant. Well, that wasn't part of the plan. So we have to cover up that I got her pregnant. So I got to get her husband called back from the army, tell him to go and sleep with his wife tonight. So 9 months from now, it'll be assumed that the husband did it. Then it gets more complicated because the husband won't go inside the house. And everybody sees publicly he won't go in. So now you got that problem. She's going to get pregnant, and from whom? And on top of it, he's publicly rebelling against me, so now I have to have him executed. But now that I have to have him executed, I'm going to execute him. She's going to get pregnant. She's going to show 9 months. I'm going to marry her. People are going to think I executed him because I wanted her, not because he was a rebel. The whole thing got completely out of control. And each step along the way, he did legally, but actually was worse. So we've learned all of this. He legally had Uriah executed for rebellion, but it made things so much worse. And everything along the way, how it sent the message to Yoav to put Uriah in a place of great peril, etc., etc. Okay. Rava taught, another rabbi, Rava. So there's one rabbi known as Rav. He was the lead rabbi in the city of Sura in Babylonia. Rava was the lead rabbi in the city of Neherdah in Babylonia. The Jewish community of Babylonia was like parts of course, Eretz Israel, but if you're thinking of exile outside of Israel, think of a place like Brooklyn, New York, Borough Park and Crown Heights and Williamsburg, Flatbush now, the places where Lakewood, New Jersey, places where there's an extraordinary amount of Torah learning and everything like that. That's what was going on in Babylonia. The Jews who had been exiled from Israel by Nebuchadnezzar, well, later on, a goodly number of them returned to Eretz Israel by decree of King Cyrus. And then they started building the Beit HaMikdash. And then that was permitted. King Darius, Daryavish, saw it through. It's a whole long story. We actually covered that once upon a time. And the majority of the Jews did not go back, despite King Cyrus saying, you can all go back. The majority stayed in Babylonia. Sort of like now, Israel's available, what's holding you up? And if you're in my class, you're a passionate Zionist, like over the top 1% Zionist, and you're not living in Israel, and you know the reason. Each of us has our own reason. It could be a health reason, it could be a practical reason, it could be children, it could be any of a number of reasons. In the same way, Babylonia had an extraordinarily high, sophisticated, Orthodox, no such thing as Orthodox in those days. Everybody was Orthodox, basically, Jewish population. So Rava and Rav, whom we're quoting, were basically in the academies in Babylonia having this discussion. And he's asking, so my dichtiv lamatz, well, actually, so he's trying to understand that David felt that he was righteous. And he's saying, I'm righteous. And slowly but surely, he's evolving to self-awareness that what he did, he actually failed the test. And he hasn't even reached the apex of that test. So we continue. 9. Darash Rava. So Rava further learns and says, what is the meaning of the following sentence in King David's Psalms? This is from Psalm 38:18. Tell me I prepared it. 38. I did not pull 38. Did not pull 38. Okay. We'll pull it. In Psalm 38, David said, I fear they will rejoice, that my enemies. I wait for you, O Lord. You will answer, O Lord my God. For I fear they will rejoice over me. When my foot gives way, they will vaunt themselves against me. For I am on the verge of collapse. My pain is always with me. I acknowledge my iniquity, my iniquity. I am fearful over my sin. The rabbis are saying, Rava is saying, that those verses were written in reference to the sin of Bathsheba. And the paradox is he had no way of knowing, but actually he was going to have Bathsheba as his wife anyway. It was his destiny and hers that they were going to marry. He didn't, and she didn't know that. There's a midrash in the Gemara, another Gemara, that when every person is born, when his soul is created or her soul is created, a voice goes out from heaven, a bat kol, and says, this soul is intended, the name of that person, for this soul. And the names are spoken out. That's this idea of the expression, marriage is made in heaven. That God literally, in the Talmud, the marriages are made in heaven. At the time of the inception of the soul, before it even comes down to be put into a body, God has already designated who the intended wife is and husband is. And then if the question is asked, so how could there be so many divorces? How can we have divorces if all the marriages are preset? It's a simple answer. One shmendrik makes a mistake and the whole thing gets messed up. If a shmendrik marries the wrong woman, not the one that was meant for him, she's wearing a certain perfume that day at the date, or she has a certain appearance, whatever it is, and he doesn't think beyond something superficial and doesn't look into her soul, and he marries the wrong person, well, she was meant for some other guy, but she's taken out of the picture now. So that guy ends up marrying the wrong person, and that guy ends up, and there it goes, blah, 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 blah. Or sometimes there's divorce because I like to think in my situation that my first marriage was a disaster, and that was not the person I think I was supposed to marry, but maybe it was. Maybe that marriage was supposed to teach me certain things about marriage and about being a better husband. You know, they don't have a 3-credit course in college on marriage the way they have a 3-credit course on hating Israel. And so some of us will learn from our parents, and some intuitively know how to do things, and some of us make mistakes. And when I finally married the person I was supposed to marry, Ellen Zichron Livracha, so I was ready for that marriage and did not blow it. And she previously had been married too. And from that, she learned certain things. So we were prepared. So sometimes there's divorce because it's part of God's plan to prepare us. So then what do we do with Denise in that storyline? Who's to say Denise was not, and I was not, we were not destined to marry each other also? That for whatever God's reasons, Ellen was going to live to age 64, for whatever his reasons. And we should never think that when someone dies younger than 80 and 90, there was a sin. A lot of righteous people die young, and a lot of evil people live long. We don't know why. God knows why. And it could very well be that Denise's place in my life and my place in her life was meant later, because we have a wonderful marriage, Baruch Hashem. So again, the question, how can you have two wonderful marriages? So what I just explained. And of course, there used to be polygamy, halachically permitted polygamy. So the Gemara now is telling us that actually, guess what? David was supposed to marry Bathsheba. Bathsheba was supposed to marry David. Well, how is that going to happen? Well, David, we know, he's not limited in wives up to 18. And we've talked about that a lot. So he had room for one more, like Bill Cosby and Jello. He had room for one more. And for Bathsheba, it very well seems to be that if David had not told Yoav to put Uriah at the front line to get himself killed, Uriah would have been at battle and would have gotten killed anyway, because that would have been the plan, God's plan. And Bathsheba would have been a widow anyway, and she would have been across the street from David anyway. So the Gemara says they would have married anyway. But instead of it being the righteous way, this is what happened instead. So we continue. Rava taught, let's take that off the screen. What is the meaning of that which is written, for I am ready to stumble, and my pain is always before me? But Sheva, the daughter of Eliam, was designated as fit for David from the time of the 6 days of creation. It doesn't get earlier than that. Misheshet Yemei Bereshit, from the founding of the earth, of the world, the wife of the man who would be progenitor of Messiah was already pre-designated for him. Rav interpret now the word Selah that he uses in chapter 38 of the Psalm. Selah can refer to stumbling, but it also refers to like a rib, Adam's rib, that God took Adam's Selah and Eve was created from it. Solea is the term that's used with Jacob after he wrestled with the angel of God and came away limping. So a word can have more than one meaning. And we have that in English all the time, right? So the same word, stumble, he says, ready to stumble. Also, Rav interprets it's referring to Eve, the first man's wife. Just as Eve was destined for Adam, Bathsheba was destined for David. But she ended up coming through pain. It was done the wrong way. And likewise, let's look at it in Hebrew, same idea. Not only did Rava, the rabbi of Neherdah, teach this, but in the house of Rabbi Yishmael, his academy, Chen Tana Deve Rabbi Yishmael, Ru'uya Hayatala David Bat Sheva Bat Eliam Elisha Achala Paga. Likewise, just as Bathsheba was intended from day one to be David's wife, David was intended from day one to be married to Bathsheba, but he took her a little too soon. He had to wait a little bit longer. It was coming anyway. Dorash Rava. So Rava continues teaching on this. Well, I'm going to move on to 11, time and other factors. Below Ot El B'Shashem Oskim Ba'arba Mitot Beitin, there was a problem. After the sin and the incident with Bathsheba, David now was marked and the whole public knew about it. He still was the king, and you weren't going to badmouth him because we know what happened to Uriah the Hittite when he badmouthed him, and later it would happen to others who got over there, who got out of line. But people, it became an ongoing embarrassment to David throughout his career. Think of public politicians. And I don't, we say we have an expression in religious Torah learning, lahavdil. Lahavdil means, lahavdil, I'm going to give you a comparison, but honestly, even though it's a good comparison, it's no comparison because one is so holy and one is so unholy that it's almost a shame to use this comparison, but it's just such a good comparison. So lahavdil, it's like Bill Clinton and Lewinsky, in the sense that because of that Lewinsky incident, of course, Clinton already, Lewinsky wasn't the first, she was at least the fifth. Everyone from Paula Corbin Jones to, I don't know, the whole bunch of them, Kathleen Willey and Juanita Broderick, and even before. So that was, but the example's the following. Let's say Clinton never did it again after Lewinsky. Sorry, Papa. After Lewinsky, let's say Clinton never fooled around again. That was it. He'd been getting away with it for 20 years, and he thought he was, bulletproof. And after what that did to him, and what what must have gone on behind closed doors, let's say he never ever did it again. Let's even imagine he became righteous, that he became a tzaddik, which he didn't, but let's say he certainly became, I would say, a better person after he was out of office. Once he no longer had to strive for power, already you start becoming a better person in most cases. So let's say when he dies, and I don't wish bad on him, let him live 150 years. It's fine. And they should be healthy years. Good for him. When he dies and they write all his biographies, every biography of Clinton will have a chapter about Monica Lewinsky. And even as we're talking, here we are in Irvine learning Navi, and we're talking about Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. It defines Clinton's life. If Clinton can go and say, and I'm not exactly a Clinton fan, but if Clinton could say, I was president and I was reelected and I was popular and the economy was great on my watch, it was, and this and that, and from his perspective, I almost brought peace in the Middle East, which was a disaster, but a lot of people don't get that. And if he would go and say, and I did this and I did that and I was a world leader and it will never be expunged from his name, Monica Lewinsky. That's what David was experiencing now, that this had gotten out of control. And he would be defined for the rest of his life. He's even the progenitor of Mashiach. David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. David, king of Israel, will live forever. And David in the Beit HaMikdash. And David and Goliath. And David, father of Solomon, and all the things about King David, and David, the writer of the book of Psalms, Tehillim, all the mitzvahs and everything about David, he can never be discussed without also Bathsheba and that incident. And so the Gemara is talking about it and saying about how he's talking to God now, realizing what he's got himself on, what he's got on his plate. He says in the Torah, in the Torah Academy nearby the palace, if they were sitting and learning Jewish law, under Jewish law, there are 4 forms of execution, capital punishment. Like in the United States over the years, we've had what? Hanging, gas chamber, the electric chair, injection of some kind of drug that'll kill the guy. So in the Torah, there are 4 kinds of death. penalties, and which one is applied depends on the crime. One sin is punishable by this, and another sin is punishable by that. And the four kinds of death include skila, sreifa, hereg, v'chenek. Skila is stoning, sreifa is burning, hereg is by sword, and chenek is by strangulation. So strangulation, like think of hanging on a gallows. And so there's four forms of punishment, depending on the sin, which one would be. And it was not contrary to secular ideas. It was anything but a hanging society. There was almost no capital punishment among the Jews, because in order to get convicted on capital crime that would be death eligible, you needed so many things to fall into place in the prosecution that it was almost impossible to get. You could get a conviction for murder, but you couldn't get a death penalty unless everything fell into place, such as there had to be at least two witnesses. The witnesses had to be there at the time and had to actually warn the guy, the murderer, as he was about just before he murdered. And the murderer had to turn around and say, I heard you, I acknowledge what you said, and then he goes and does it anyway. So how often does that happen? And they have to tell the murderer, before he murders, the exact penalty he's facing. And the average layman has no idea which of the four, how many of us knows the intricate details of that aspect of the law, and so on and so forth, to the degree that the Talmud says that if a Jewish Supreme Court, a Sanhedrin that executed one Jew in 7 years, was known in the society as a bloody Sanhedrin, a bloody Supreme Court. And Rabbi Akiva says actually one in 70 years. One execution 70 years was considered bloody. So although there were lots of death penalties, they weren't actually typically applied, but occasionally they were. So anyway, in the academy, near the palace, I guess, when rabbis would learn and study and delve into the differences of the four types of capital punishment and when do they apply, yada, yada, yada. Poskin the Mishnatan, someone invariably would stop and ask, V'omrim li David haba al eshet ish mitato bameh. And someone would end up saying, well, let me ask you this, my colleagues. In the case of David, who slept with a married woman, what would his death penalty have been? So in other words, David lived knowing that in academies of Torah, whenever they would discuss the death penalty, to learn the laws and its applications and its exemptions, his name always would come up. For example, what would David get if not for X or Y? So he carried that all his life, not only after his life that we're talking about it, and we're talking about it actually with a lot of deep respect, as opposed to so many Reform rabbis, conservative rabbis who just make a joke of the whole thing. Laity who are non-Orthodox who just mock and make jokes and they don't know what was going on. And they talk about it in a really disgusting way. So Amarti lahem haba al eshet ish mitato b'chenek v'yesh lo chelek olam haba. And David says, actually, there was a time that I was passing such a place, and I heard them kind of like having that discussion. I overheard they're talking, what would be the death penalty for King David under Torah law for being with a married woman? And I said, David says to God, I said to them, you want to know? Oh, oops, he heard us. Oops, he heard us. Yeah, I heard you. So, quote, here's what I told them. Haba al eshet ish mitato b'chenek. Someone who commits adultery has intercourse with a married woman. If all the pieces of the required puzzle fall into place, he is punished by strangulation, like hanging. V'yesh lo chelek l'olam haba, but his soul still has reward in the world to come. His hanging, his execution expiates the sin. He pays for the sin, and he cleans the sin from his soul by being executed. It is considered misa, death, mita mekaperet. Death atones. When someone dies, even if not executed, just natural death, it is regarded in Jewish law as a major atonement for so very, very much of the sins of one's life. On the other hand, suicide is just the opposite. If someone will say, well, I just heard what you said, so let me clean my soul and go to heaven right now clean. With suicide, just the opposite. Because with suicide, your very last act is a sin, murder, for which you did not have time or opportunity to atone for that. The death in your suicide may have expiated before, and now you go with hanging over you, you go up for judgment with murder on your hands. Anyway, so David said to them, all right, someone who commits adultery, if all the pieces fall into place, gets hanging, gets strangulation, v'yesh lo chelek l'olam haba. And with that sin of adultery cleaned out, he has a place in the world to come. And if he lived a righteous life, a good life, he has eternal reward. Judaism believes that people, it's not like if there's a sin, there's no way out. And Judaism believes God gives eternal reward, that death itself atones. And every Yom Kippur we atone. And between Yom Kippurs we can pray to God and ask forgiveness. So David's saying to the people in the room who are studying and asking, well, someone who does that ends up with a place in the world to come. However, aval hamal bin panei chavero barabim ein lo chelek l'olam haba. However, someone who humiliates and embarrasses another person in public has no place in the world to come. How do you like that? Someone who embarrasses someone in public has no place in the world to come. Unless he atones, and it's a whole story. Well, let's take a moment to just think about that. We're kind of running over time almost. So let's think about that a moment. Very important. Because the way we learn is we learn the story of David and Bathsheba. And we're also, these classes are to learn Judaism also. They're a jumping off point to learn Judaism. This is known as Motzi Shemra. Motzi Shemra is slander. If you write it, it would be libel, defamation. Motzi Shemra. Shem is a name, Ra is evil. Motzi is sending out, circulating a bad name. If a person goes and circulates a bad name, slanders, defames, libels another person, they have no place in the world to come. Unless they go to the person, ask forgiveness, they turn to God, they pray for forgiveness. That's part of in that long list of achet shechatanu, that's in the list. Achet shechatanu, lashon hara, right? And lashon hara, evil talk, lashon is the tongue or language or talk, and hara is evil. Lashon hara, evil talk, is when it's true, but it's defamatory. Even though it's true, so you cannot get convicted in American law. In American law, truth is a complete defense to a lawsuit over defamation. If it's true, it's true. So I'm not the defamer. You who did the thing, you defamed yourself by doing it. So on the one hand, in secular law, you can talk bad about people as long as it's true. In Judaism, you're not allowed to talk bad about people, even if it is true. Well, Rabbi, just a second. Oh, you sometimes say things about Reform Judaism and their rabbis, and conservative Judaism and their rabbis, Bernie Sanders and George Soros here you're doing it again. You're naming them, you name J Street and if not now, and you're just going on and on. And what about elections in Israel? They have religious parties too. I mean, Shas and Yahadut Torah, Agudat Yisrael, Digat Torah, and they say things. And so what's with that? Chafetz Chaim, the rabbi known as the Chafetz Chaim, about 100 years ago, wrote a very famous book on talking evil, Shmirat Halashon, guarding your tongue. And it's a law book. He culls from all the laws of the Torah and the Rambam and the Gemara and the Rambam, the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Rambam, and everybody. He culls all the laws together in a book of law, like a Shulchan Aruch, like a code of Jewish law relating solely to speaking evil about people. And he explains that sometimes it's permitted and it's not regarded as speaking evil. Give you two quick examples he gives. Example number one, John Doe approaches me, wants to go into business with me. We're going to sell widgets. That's what lawyers do. We're going to sell widgets. And he's going to put up $50,000 and I have to put up $50,000. And he's worked out the books and he's worked out the whole. It is appropriate for me, if I have any common sense, to ask around. I don't really know John Doe. He was referred to me by someone who's going to get a referral fee, and I don't know him per se. And is he a good guy to go into business with? And if someone can tell me knowingly, I hate to say it, but he's a crook. He's dishonest. I know someone who went into business with him, lost a fortune. He had fraud and all kinds of illegal. He's got no business ethics. That's not Lashon Hara. That's a mitzvah. In fact, it's a sin to sit on that information, if you know it, to be holier than thou and say, oh, I know a lot of stuff to tell him, but it'll be Lashon Hara, so he'll find out on his own. No, it would be a sin not to tell. And the Chafetz Chaim's other main example is if someone is suggested a shidduch, a marriage partner. Someone goes to John Doe and, well, let's do it the other way. Someone goes to Jane Doe and says, I have a wonderful guy for you. His name is John Doe, and he's just a wonderful match. And then she should go to some people and find out who is this guy? What's the story? And a common thing is to ask his rabbi. It's a common thing in the Orthodox community. Who's your rabbi? My rabbi is Rabbi ABC. Okay. Is it okay? I'm going to call Rabbi ABC, just find out about you. And she calls, and it goes both ways. What should I know about him? And that's not all. If you could find out anything else. If you could find out anybody who knows his family. Does he have any mental illness in his family? Do you know anything about his siblings? Now, you can come and say, what a shame to blacklist the guy just because he's got mental illness in the family and he's got a sibling who committed murder or other stuff. But if you want to be sensible and proper, that's something that's done. And as a rabbi, I've been called over the last 40 years countless times. Most often, I might say I don't really know the guy that well. Once in a while, I do, and I tell them what I know. Baruch Hashem, usually the people that hang around with me after they get to know me are good people, because I don't put up with stuff. So I end up with pretty good people. But I've one person who, for example, went to a very big rabbi and was matched with a fellow who wore a black hat family. Father's a baker. He's passed away since. And she went to that rabbi. I heard about this later after the divorce. So you already know how this is going to end up. She went to the rabbi and said, he comes from a very religious family. They're always in shul on Shabbos. They keep Shabbos. They're kosher. He's the kosher baker in the community. And so she married the guy. Turned out the guy, first of all, was bisexual. Secondly, it turns out that the guy, as a teenager, was thrown out of a yeshiva he was in because he was propositioning other boys. Turns out that he was a crook. Turns out in their marriage, he committed arson to collect insurance. They had a store. This is when she came to me and she decided to get a divorce. They had a store and she thought she didn't know. And he set fire to the store for the insurance. Turns out his father was a crook. His father with the kosher bakery once had a break-in, had a robbery first thing in the morning and reported to the insurance that they took something like $100,000 cash from his cash register. And the insurance said, you had $100,000 in your cash register. They open up 5 in the morning at the bakeries to start baking the bagels and the breads. You had $100,000 cash in your cash register 8 in the morning? He said, yeah. And what that fellow did, the baker, is every day for the next 2 months, he had a big bag of like $100,000 of cash, and he came in 4:30 every morning, and he filled up his cash register every morning with $100,000. And after about a month and a half of that, one day, a surprise visit from the insurance company's investigator. He just pulled a surprise 5 in the morning. Hi, I'm so-and-so from such insurance. I'm here. We're processing your claim. I'd like to see what's in your cash register. And the guy really souped it up. Why? You don't trust me? And of course, we trust all our clients, but and he was like very self-righteous. And then in anger, he opens his cash register and there's $100,000 cash. And he collected, and I heard this story from his son who married that lady. So while I briefly knew that couple, he was bragging on that story. What a smart dad he has. So all this culminated one day with the wife going to the dry, you know how it always ends. She goes to the dry cleaner, picks up his pants, finds a receipt inside for like a $5,000 diamond ring or a $10,000 diamond ring, and it wasn't for her, and that was it. So why am I telling you all this? Because she, at my suggestion, then went back to the rabbi who gave the green light 4 years earlier. I said, why don't you go to Rabbi so-and-so, tell him what I just told you, ask him, what was that about? And he started to apologize and apologize and apologize on top of apologies, od yoter v'od yoter v'od yoter, and more and more and more, saying I had heard all those things, but I didn't want to talk Lashon Hara about him. When you asked me, I didn't want to talk Lashon Hara. I didn't want to speak badly about him, and I wanted to believe it wasn't true that he had propositioned boys and would. So Jewish law very much not only encourages but requires telling the truth, even if it's bad. And when people are running for office, and if you're running against Ehud Barak, let's say, who's going to destroy the country if he becomes prime minister, you have to warn the people this is what will happen. Nevertheless, David HaMelech is talking about people don't have to be using me as an example. When they're talking about the 4 forms of capital punishment and they're sitting and they're learning, they really don't have to sit there asking, and what about King David? Like there's no one else who ever committed adultery. Like, why don't they say, what about Bill Clinton? Or what about, all the other people? Why did they have to use the king of Israel, me, as the storyline? And he bears the shame. I'll wipe it. I'll close up now because I know we're over, but it's just so interesting to me. I'm sorry. I hope it was interesting to you too. And it's also not just interesting like a story, but interesting in learning Judaism and learning important laws. So just to wrap up this little paragraph or so of the Gemara, we'll continue next time, Yetz Hashem. So it says that in light of that, David had said, if you really want to know person who commits adultery gets strangulation, but a place in the world to come. But for people, he doesn't say for people like you, but he says, but for people who speak Lashon Hara and embarrass someone to that degree, they lose a place in the world to come. Everyone else too, see you Thursday, and I'll let you go. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.